Welcome, my friends, to The Eyes of Mara, a new miniseries from Those Happy Places, all about Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Forbidden Eye. I'm Buddy Duquesne.
And I'm Alice White.
And Alice, guess what?
What?
We are back for the third episode in this 4-part miniseries. This one is titled The Ride Today, or Eternal Youth and Beauty. You have chosen wisely, Alice, because this is the episode all about this classic attraction and how it has aged. And honestly, I think we've kind of got our work cut out for us here, because this is a ride that, in the hearts and minds of theme park fans everywhere, has aged uniquely.
Yeah, it's hard to say whether it's aged well or poorly. But it has aged, and it's definitely a controversial subject amongst theme park fans everywhere. We have to go back to the ride itself and talk about what it is that has changed over the years. So last week we did the whole episode all about what the ride looked like in 1995. And we touched a little bit on what parts of the ride in 1995 are like irretrievably broken, or which parts of the ride are irrevocably changed. But this time we're going to go into maybe a little bit more detail on some of the smaller stuff that has changed over the years. And we're going to talk about why that is, what the reaction has been for people and fans everywhere, and what we can maybe look for in the future when it comes to Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I feel really lucky because I was able to ride this attraction about 2 weeks before we recorded this podcast, right? So, like, it's still really fresh in my mind how this ride still hits. Like, it hits quite well, actually. It's a good attraction. And yet, on the other hand, spoiler alert for a later portion of this episode, but like, it was not everything I remembered it being. And it was, in many ways, a suboptimal way to experience this attraction. And I think that's interesting, right? Like, Alice, before we started this episode, we were talking to your husband, who was in the room with you as we were preparing. Mm-hmm. And he's a casual fan of theme parks, right?
Yes, he is a casual theme park fan. He's more of like he likes a good roller coaster and, will hang out during the day. But he's not like a theme park super fan. Not like some people that host theme park related podcasts.
Oh, I've never heard of any theme park related podcasts. Can you recommend a good one?
Yeah, I'll get back to you on that.
But what exactly were his words about Indiana Jones, the Indiana Jones adventure?
Right. So my husband is a massive fan of the Indiana Jones ride. That is, as in his words, his favorite attraction in all of the Disney parks. And we asked him, we said, hey, last time we rode this ride, last time we were there, it was January 2022. So last time we rode on this ride, did you notice stuff that was broken? And he goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. No hesitation at all. And I said, does that make your riding the ride less, like, does it make it worse or what? And he goes, I still love the ride, but noticing all of the broken pieces of the ride makes the ride feel like a pale shadow of what it once was.
It's incredibly poetic.
Yes.
A pale shadow of its former self.
Yes. We've been watching a lot of Rings of Power lately, so... Yeah.
It feels old, Gandalf, like butter spread across too much toast. Like it's still there, and it's still meaningful, and it's still impactful, and it still improves your day at the Disneyland Resort to enjoy the Indiana Jones adventure, right? Like butter would improve toast, but it feels stretched thin.
Yes.
And it does feel diminished. And perhaps it should go into the West with its people and remain Galadriel. Or perhaps, Alice, in place of this dark tomb, we could have a king of rides. Not dark, but one that is beautiful and terrible as the dawn. Treacherous as the sea, Alice. Stronger than the foundations of the earth. I'm talking about, like, the ride. And so it's interesting that he described it that way. And a Pale Shadow is maybe more dramatic of a way to describe it than I would. But on the other hand, it is not itself. And so, like you said, we need to go back. We need to start in 1995. So definitely, if you haven't listened to the last episode of this miniseries, you should definitely go back and join us in 1995. But as the years marched onward, effects were removed or lost or simply and obviously broken.
Yeah. And the loss of certain effects and the changing of certain effects has been so well documented over the years that because this ride has inspired so many fans to become like historians of the ride. It's really easy to go online and find like compilations and lists of things that have broken over the years, things that the ways that the ride used to be, ways that the ride used to startle and scare you, and how they have changed, broken, or been removed entirely from the ride. And so I have to thank Reddit for a lot of this list, and YouTube, of course, for finding a collection of some of the. Here we have a list of some of the more obvious broken effects, some of the more obvious changes that have been made over the years, and we're going to go through this list and kind of talk about what about each of these things has changed and how it affects the story as a whole and how it affects like the experience riding the ride. But we covered some of this last week. So again, go you can go listen to last week's episode. We do encourage that. We mentioned certain effects being broken as we passed through them in our 1995 ride walkthrough. But we're going to maybe go into a little bit more detail on some of this and talk about like if you, the listener, were to ride Indiana Jones Adventure, formerly known as Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Forbidden Eye, this is exactly what you would experience today.
Yeah, and it's funny you should mention Reddit. I remember years ago reading a list of broken effects on a Reddit thread, specifically about the Indiana Jones Adventure. And I was like, how do people pay this close attention to all the ways that it's broken? But I was also like, I can't believe it's broken all of these ways.
Yeah.
We have an incomplete list in front of us. The things that we could independently confirm.
Yes, the things that we could verify. So I did find that list again, and it hasn't been updated for over 2 years. And in the last 2 years, Indiana Jones has been shut down, like during COVID. And so we know some effects were fixed, or if not fixed, then like changed. So that list that we found was is also incomplete or inaccurate. And so right. This is the best version of the list that we could find today. And as to how they get all of that information, well, I'll tell you that that person who made that list on Reddit, the very comprehensive list on Reddit, said in the comments that they ride the Indiana Jones ride 4 or 5 times every time they visit Disneyland, and they visit Disneyland 3 or 4 times a week.
Wow. Okay. So we're talking about like a super fan, like a true, like lives at the park super fan.
Yes. Yes. Okay. A level of dedication that we could only dream of having. And I have mad respect for anybody who has found their thing, found their niche, right? Right. And is dedicating themselves to that. But I got to say, that's a lot of times to ride Indiana Jones.
That's a whole lot of times to ride Indiana Jones. So to start you off, this one is an effect that we talked about last week. It is this removed effect, purposefully removed effect. The walls of the Chamber of Destiny no longer move, and the ride vehicle no longer appears to go through a left, right, or center door. Now we always go through the center door.
Yes, always through the center door. Now the center door is now not necessarily always the same room, and that's the change here. So it used to be that the left, center, and right doors were assigned. This was what room you're going into. And you went left, you knew you were going to the visions of the future. You went center, you're going to gold. And now you're always going center, but you don't know which room it's going to be until you get there.
Right. And so the fix on this, the thing that makes it, still kind of work as an effect that looks like you're going down a unique path, is they've used projection mapping, which is relatively new technology compared to 1995, to project a kind of aura around the center door, depending on what treasure of Mara you're getting. So there's like a little projection and light show. It turns all blue if you're getting the Fountain of Youth. It turns all purple if you're getting Visions of the Future. And of course, it turns glittering gold if you are about to receive glittering gold. It is yours. And so that's, for me, this works well enough where I'm not like, oh man, if only the doors were still rotating. But also it seems odd that there are 3 doors still, like the other 2 doors are still visible. It definitely diminishes that moment. It feels less random that you're always going center. But the projection mapping is pretty cool. So maybe point for modern? I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels like a neutral change, honestly.
I agree, neutral change. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. That that the walls no longer move. If it means less downtime for the ride, if it means, that the ride moves forward faster more often, that's probably a good thing. That's probably why it changed, because if the walls break, then the ride can't move forward.
Right.
And yeah, the projection mapping is kind of cool. It does kind of remove some of the like re-rideability of it. So if you were, if you were young and you were riding the ride and you go through the center door and it's the gold one, and then you do it again and it's the center door again, but it's blue this time. Like it's kind of cool. Like, oh, the center room changes, but there's no longer, like, I remember riding the ride at pretty young thinking, oh, which way are we going to go? Which door are we going to go through? And then as I got taller, being able to see the track on the ground. Yeah. And calling it before we got there.
Oh, it's left. We're going left.
We're going left. And that was just one of our goofy, things that we would do when we were teens on the ride.
Yeah, it's funny that the like physical variation makes it feel like it's a unique writing experience, because like I don't see how this projection mapping effect is any different than the randomizing on Star Tours The Adventures Continue, or the different songs that you can get on Guardians of the Galaxy : Mission dash breakout. Oh, no, it's Guardians of the Galaxy dash mission : breakout exclamation point. Mm-hmm. Like it's going to be a different song every time. So like you want to ride until you get whatever song is your favorite, right?
Yeah.
But it's funny, I do remember wanting to ride Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Forbidden Eye until we went left. Like, I want to see the left door today, actually.
Yeah. Which is so funny to look back on it and know how the effect was created, because it is still the same door.
It's the same dang hallway.
It's the same dang hallway. It's always been the same hallway. We're just no longer getting the simulated fake out of which door we're going through, even though like physically nothing has changed. It's the same door.
The simulation is just changed in nature, and maybe it speaks to our cynicism a little bit. Like, it's just projection mapped. It's not really moving the doors. Like maybe it just goes to show that physical effects will age more gracefully than anything that the wonders of modern digital technology can conjure. I don't know if I feel 100% on that, but it's an interesting line of questioning, right?
Yeah, something to think about.
So as you pass through the door, there are new projection effects, speaking of, in the Chamber of Destiny itself. This would include new lighting effects that have changed multiple times since Ride Open, and new projection maps on the big idol of Mara at the end of the hallway, which... this is very cool, actually. This is a big plus.
I was going to say, this, I think, is an excellent change. So I do remember being young, riding this ride. And it was before I knew how the door effect worked. like, oh, which door is which, and before I knew that we were always going through the same door. But I do remember, I have a distinct memory of climbing up the hill and looking to the side and seeing the like shadow of like the Fountain of Youth screens.
Yeah.
They were like, they would put up different screens on the side panels and then light up whichever ones, you know, which room you were going through.
It's a clever lighting trick that changes the hallway from one room to another. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I remember looking and being like, is that the Fountain of Youth? We're in the gold room though. And like, because the lighting effect just wasn't as effective. And now this might be a direct contradiction of what you just said about physical effects aging more gracefully.
Yeah.
But I think because that light bulb wasn't working as intended, or you know, something was wrong, and I could see the Fountain of Youth in the room of gold. It ruined the immersion for me. And so now with the newer projections and the newer projection mapping on the face of Mara and all of that, I think that this is now more immersive and better. If I can say that. I think that now you know you're going through the same room every time, but the projection makes it more convincing that that it could be a different room or a magical effect.
I agree, and especially the projection on Mara going from benevolent to kind of a crumbling, rotting skull right before your eyes as things go from peaceful to dangerous. It just sells the whole thing, because before that was just kind of a strobe effect. And there wasn't anything really except for Mara's voice lines. Your path now leads to the gates of doom. And then
his laugh.
and then you would swerve away. This new projection mapping really sells the whole, like, oh, you did a bad thing and this evil idol is going to kill you now. So that's all really good. Now, as we are swept to the left, this is an infamously broken effect. The ride vehicle no longer feels as if it is floating towards the gates of doom. It doesn't feel like anything, really. It just kind of feels like the Jeep is driving in a kind of jerky, wrong direction sort of way.
Yeah, like it's being driven uphill. And the reason why I think, like, I never really noticed that it was floating, or especially recently, that it was supposed to be a floating effect. One, because it's so jerky and stuff, but also because I feel like it tips the nose of the car too far up.
Yeah.
And so, like, you're going up a hill, clearly, and it's like you're being dragged, but the nose of the car is so far up that if you're in the wrong spot in the car, you can't see Indiana Jones right away. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this floatiness thing, it's so abstract, you know? It's like, oh, the car's floating, but like nobody's pointing that out. It's unclear that it's the Gates of Doom causing this. And personally speaking, I do not remember ever feeling like the Jeep was floating towards the Gates of Doom.
Yeah.
This is not an effect I remember, and I've been riding this ride for a while, so if it ever worked, it feels very subtle, and that subtlety is hard to complain about in terms of a theme park ride.
Right. And a related effect, the Indiana Jones audio animatronic that is working on closing the Gates of Doom no longer fully close. He's just kind of pushing on them a little bit.
Yeah.
And it seems like maybe some force is trying to get out, and he's like holding the door against the, you know, magic forces. So in the version of the ride, that the version of the story you're supposed to get is that you're floating, and then the door closes and you kind of slam to the ground because you're no longer floating.
The power's been cut off from beyond the gate or whatever.
So you still do that. You still are, you know, floating around, and then there's the sound effect of the door closing, and the car jerks violently. It has one violent jerky moment like it's hitting the ground. But because the floating effect is too jerky, and because the gate no longer closes, that whole effect is completely gone. Like,
the whole sequence barely reads. And honestly, I don't know if the sequence ever really read. You know, like, the gate closes and the Jeep is now free to drive again. It just wasn't being clearly communicated to the audience. Yeah. I consider this a weak moment in terms of its design, not just in terms of now it's super broken.
Yeah.
But then again, it is super broken. Don't get us wrong.
It is super broken. The room itself is rather lovely. The gates
are
cool. The new projection mapping in there is also cool, where it kind of, it almost looks like something is like energy is flying about the room in a way. It still looks good, and the audio animatronic looks good too. And it's like fine. You're getting started. This is your first look at Indiana Jones and the first like terror that you face. So it's like fine, but no longer as effective as it used to be.
Now, as the Jeep climbs the steps, the big steps up to the left, we are supposed to kind of come into the main chamber of the Forbidden Eye, the Trail of Torment, and see another depiction of Mara at the center of the room, right? Over the lava pit. And there's supposed to be a big fire in the eye of Mara that you are supposed to like see, and like light is supposed to shine through, and it's like Mara's firing laser beams out of his eye through this fire. That is supposed to be actual physical fire, and it's been a long time since I remember seeing that.
Yeah, I don't know if the pyrotechnic, like actual fire effects in this ride are working anymore at all, because that is not the only piece of fire in that room that I remember. I seem to remember jets of fire spurting up in some places, and I don't believe that they have actual pyrotechnics in that room anymore.
Thinking back on my most recent re-ride, I think there was one pyrotechnic effect, and I cannot recall when I saw it.
Just like a random burst of flame from a wall, right?
Yeah, and that's really disappointing because fire is cool.
Fire is cool. It makes for a really effective, like, shock moment for riders. Like, oh my gosh. And you could feel the heat from like a good distance away.
Yeah.
And pyrotechnics are like a hugely effective thing for rides, for making a ride or an experience or an attraction or even a nighttime spectacular look better, look cooler, look more realistic even, because you can't. Yeah, it's hard to fake fire. So when you can feel the heat coming off of something, that is special.
Yeah, and look, I think fire effects near guests are understandable, like why you might want to tone that down a little bit. But the eye fire not being lit, I feel like that one's kind of really bad show, in my opinion.
Yeah.
When it is such an iconic part of seeing what has become of this idol, it makes it feel so much more alive and haunted at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree.
So the next broken effect is everybody's favorite, the ice machine.
Yep. The ice machine's been broken for, like, I don't know, a really long time.
How old is the ride?
The ride is, 25 years old now.
Okay, now take 1 month off of that age, and that's how long the ice machine has been broken.
Yeah, the ice machine's been broken a long time. And we talked about this last episode.
Yeah, we talked about it in the last episode. This was supposed to drop ice near or onto the hood of the Jeep, kind of simulating rubble falling onto the Jeep. Why, Alice, will the ice never come back, do you think?
Because water is really damaging to mechanical effects.
Oh, so you say, and so we all agree. I feel like it should have, everybody involved should have realized that the ice was like a bad idea.
Yeah, the ice was a bad idea. It was a cool effect and looked awesome. There is no way that becomes a that comes back.
One could say it was a cold effect, actually.
It's not going to come back unless they find a way to constantly replenish, like, some kind of false, or like styrofoam or something. Like, if you can get something not water to fall from the ceiling and look like rubble, you might see that effect come back.
Maybe a machine that kind of like works like the last hole at a mini golf course. So like when stuff falls in, it goes through a series of tubes to the loading area where then it like comes back out at the top. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know why I went straight for last hole at a mini golf course, because there's definitely a better way to describe that. Sure. But you know what I'm thinking, right?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. If there was a way to make that happen, or it could be like the like a bowling alley pin pin placer, or like the falling Jeep in Jurassic Park. It's Jurassic World now, so I don't know if they still have that. But like how the Jeep used to fall from the side, and then
something that could maybe lift itself up and fall over repeatedly would make a good replacement there, I think.
Yeah.
Instead, we have nothing.
Yeah, and so there's nothing, and that's
we
fine.
have the absence of a collapsing tunnel. Just the implication through a noise in the beautiful John Williams score.
Yeah, it's a missed effect. People talk about it all the time. People who were super fans in '95 talk about it a lot. It was beloved, but it didn't work. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't belong.
I agree. Alice, in the halls of the dead, we are supposed to be accosted by several sets of 3 skeletons that kind of swing out at us. Currently, I can confirm in my most recent ride through, there are no groups of skeletons that swing out at riders. However, a few skeletons still fall somewhat menacingly on their own out of their coffins on the sides of the hall. So,
okay,
I guess we're fine then.
Yeah. It's not.
I really
cool.
missed that though.
I know.
Big swinging masses of skeletons.
Yeah,
Alice.
like 3 skeletons on the same little like ski lift shaped like swing that would come at you. That was pretty cool. I think we don't effectively lose anything if some of the skeletons still pop out at you menacingly. We're not really missing an effect here.
It is an altered effect, and definitely an effect that feels like it's been diminished, a pale shadow of its former self, but it is still there. So that's the Halls of the Dead, and now we find ourselves on the rope bridge after we make it through the bug room. The bug room is pretty much unchanged, actually.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that's changed about the bug room. I heard somebody say that the bugs are less clear on the wall, like it's a not as clear of a projection, but last time I rode it I didn't notice. It was still very clearly bugs.
It does seem to be digital projection instead of analog. Like there used to be a film of bug shadows that was running on a loop, and now it is definitely some kind of digital file that is running on a loop.
That's interesting. I never really thought about it. I never really thought about how they got it, because you can only see the bugs where the
headlights
of
the
touch
G-bar.
the wall. Yeah. And so I always just assumed it was some light from the headlight of the Jeep. Looking back, that is a silly thing to assume. I think,
it's a rotating projector that projects along with the movement of the ride vehicle.
That's fun. It feels the same. I noticed no difference last time I rode it.
Virtually unchanged. So we do find ourselves at the rope bridge now.
Yes, the rope bridge that used to be an effect where when you drive over the rope bridge, suddenly because you drive over it and the sides of the bridge, the rope at your side would suddenly drop from view and look like the rope or like the whole bridge had kind of collapsed underneath you and dropped like a couple feet. It's very similar, I think, to the collapsing bridge effect at the Universal Studios tram tour.
Yeah.
And that effect has also been broken for 20 years. So the collapsing bridge at Universal Studios comes back every once in a while when they've done some repairs on it, and then it goes away again for a couple years when it breaks. So I have a feeling this is the same kind of technology and the same kind of repair.
Yeah, the weirdness with the rope bridge effect is that it is a pause moment for certain ride through sequences. Like the ride does have a small amount of variability in timing, some of which is related to like loading issues, and some of which is just kind of like the ride runs at a lot of different speeds in general. And the rope bridge feels like a pause moment where like something perilous feels like it should happen. But because there's no associated effect, it just feels like you're stopping on the bridge. And that's what's scary, is like, oh, the bridge is rickety.
Yeah.
Okay, off we go.
It is still like a scary moment, because it's like you pull up to the bridge and it's kind of like I guess we got to go this way, even though we're in a Jeep. Like we're in a big old Jeep. It shouldn't work, but I guess we're gonna Indiana Jones it, and and then you drive a Jeep over a rope bridge, which is fine. And it shouldn't work, but it's Indiana Jones, and that's like the whole thing. And so when you pause at the beginning, even without the dropping of the bridge, even without that, it's still like a moment hanging in the balance. Are we going to make this journey? I guess so. Here we go.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, though, then you drive on the bridge, and then you can look down on either side, and it's supposed to be like this pit filled with fog with like fake magma bubbling up underneath you, to make the journey over the bridge even more dangerous. But the fog, there's no fog there anymore.
And the fake lava pit is very clearly like clear plastic with lights underneath to simulate the color and heat of lava. So it doesn't really sell the peril of the moment without the fog effect, which is a shame. So as we cross the bridge and finally make our way across, we make it to the snake chamber.
We love the snake chamber.
We love the snake chamber. Indy hates the snake chamber. Snakes, we're on our own. But, Alice, I gotta say, this one for me is my sticking point.
Yeah.
Forget the ice, forget the fire, forget that the skeletons aren't lunging at us. The Temple of the Forbidden Eye on the outside is covered with snakes. Snake iconography abounds. These really cool, stylish snakes that are basically the logo of the ride.
Mm-hmm.
And the snake room, its premiere appearance on the attraction itself, is massively disappointing.
It really is. Yeah, I agree with you that I think this is the most disappointing broken effect of the whole ride. This one feels like not only does this one feel like an easy fix, there's really only one thing truly wrong with the snake room, right? And it's the big snake at the end. So that feels like it should be like, oh, there's one thing wrong with the snake room. There's one thing that happens in the snake room that should happen, and it's not. So it feels like it should be an easy fix. But so it also feels like it's being ignored. Like the problem just had a Band-Aid put over it. And so none of the other snakes in the snake room used to move, right? And they still don't.
Yeah.
It was a bunch of still plastic snakes or carved snakes. And you drive past them and the sound of hissing is everywhere. And then the one giant cobra lunges at you, teeth out, tongue out, with a horrible hissing noise. And it gets really close to the right side of the Jeep.
Yeah.
And that was the only effect in the snake room, despite the fact that snakes are Indiana Jones's number one fear in the world. That's that could be a joke that you lean on more than once in the story. Yeah. They don't. It's the one snake room and the one snake that moves. And yet, when the snake animatronic broke, they replaced it with a plastic, unmoving, unchanging snake.
Yeah.
He just sits there and looks at you as you go by.
Now, Alice, to be fair, we are sitting here, arms firmly in our armchairs, unaware of the industrial mechanics necessary to create an audio animatronic snake that needs to operate for, 17 hours a day without stopping and do a cool lunging motion and have its teeth come out. But they did figure it out in 1995, right? and the thing is, the snake animatronic did work in a way that a lot of these other broken effects didn't. The snake worked. It's just a big snake. So I wonder what exactly the holdup is. What is so complicated? It feels like either this is being ignored and neglected, or there is some other underlying issue. Maybe the snake was a load-bearing snake, like the Yeti in Expedition Everest, and now the snake can't move anymore because it's structurally destroying the Indiana Jones adventure.
Maybe.
But that seems unlikely, given that we have a smaller, boringer snake in its place at the moment. And I just need this snake to lunge at me. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah, it's really bad. It's really ineffective. The sound of the snake hissing at you is still present, but he's so clearly not moving. It's a very, very ineffective moment in this ride, and absolutely serves to break immersion.
I mean, like, speaking of mini golf courses, like, that's kind of the level that we're at. It's a blacklit snake. You know, that's it. It's just like a picture of a snake, almost a statue of a snake. It's bad. I do not enjoy this.
It's bad, and it's hard not to compare it to other audio animatronics in the park that do similar consistent motions for hours and hours and hours at a time. Like the Pirates of the Caribbean pirates run pretty consistently. You know, occasionally one of them will break down, but I feel like they're never out for long. And like the audio animatronic Jack Sparrow on the Pirates of the Caribbean is like way more complicated in movement than Hondo Anaka on Smuggler's Run is way more complicated than the snake. You know,
Kylo Ren gets exploded, you know, every 4.5 seconds we're exploding a Kylo Ren animatronic, and it just feels like,
to be fair, he also breaks a lot.
He breaks a lot. I've seen a lot of B mode Kylo, actually. But, you know, I feel like we could at least be seeing B mode Snake. This feels like C mode Snake. It is not. And what hurts so much is that, again, this is like the symbol of the temple, right? Like snakes are promised from moment one. It's one of the first things you see. And it just feels like this needs fixing bad. But we can't dwell on it forever.
No.
So we dodge past the unmoving snake and into the interior of the skull of Mara, where a ghostly apparition of Mara menaces us. This is achieved with a screen with blacklight paint on it that a blacklight then shines on, and then the ghost kind of appears on the screen. It's a pretty cool effect. It looked better last time I wrote it, but it has been unclear for much of the ride's history.
Yes, it has been unclear for much of the ride's history. It's been hard to see, kind of disappears into the wall behind it. Like you said, like in recent months, it seems to have improved. This brings me to, this actually is going to bring me back to my husband's comments from earlier when he talks about how much of a fan of this ride he is. One of the things that he said in this conversation we had with him was that we haven't mentioned yet, is he talks about how the lighting throughout the whole ride seems to be brighter. So, you know, it's a super dark windowless temple as you're driving through, and you know, it's lit by various fires and, you know, various black lights and, you know, and stuff like that. And his observation is that in recent years, the Indiana Jones, the whole inside of the temple seems to be just a little bit brighter, and maybe just bright enough that it ruins some of the effects. Like the ride becomes less immersive because you can see more of it. Some of the tricks of, you know, the effects and how some of the effects work become more obvious if the room is a little brighter. Like if the room was really dark, we might not be able to see the magma being literally a piece of plastic, right?
Yeah.
And that could be, you know, fog also could help on that. But like if it's too bright down there, you can see a little fake little spotlight thing with plastic on it that's supposed to give a magma color. And this effect here, the spirit of Mara, if the room is too bright, the black light has nowhere to go. Like there's nothing to illuminate. If regular lights are too bright, the black light doesn't work. So
I agree.
So if it's too bright, you lose effects like this.
This one is harder to confirm because we're not exactly able to take like a light meter on the ride, nor to take a light meter back in time to see how it used to be. But I have noticed this actually a few times on Disney attractions specifically, where I'm like, oh, you know, I can see the ceiling.
Yes.
I shouldn't be able to.
I don't feel like I used to be able to, as another one.
That's interesting. And maybe I'm just older. Maybe we are just old and we see things now. But on the other hand, darker could be better when we're talking about a dark ride. So it's a good observation, and definitely it would help with this effect and the next effect that we're about to talk about, actually.
Yes, because the next effect we're going to talk about is the rats. We're going to talk about the rats that I didn't know existed until very, very recently.
Last week, Alice. Just say it.
All right. Yes. As of last week, I didn't know that this was supposed to be rats. So the next thing that you drive through, as we talked about last week, you drive through a hallway that is supposed to have branches on either side of the Jeep. On the right-hand side of the Jeep, there's supposed to be like physical branches there. According to this list I found, it appears that there used to be physical and fog projection rats and branches. Or the branches used to be physical and the rats used to be projected on fog or something. Anyways, it's impossible to see in there. It's just absolutely, absolutely impossible.
Yeah, as you said last week, and to your point, the rat effect does not look like rats. It doesn't look like anything.
It looks like cobwebs.
It looks a bit like cobwebs for sure, and I have never seen these supposed blacklight lit branches. Like, this is not in my database. I have gone into the Mind Palace. I have sacked it for every image I have of the Rat Room on Indiana Jones Adventure, and it's just not there.
It's not there.
So this effect probably has not worked in multiple decades at least.
Yes, or it was taken out, or something was changed about the physical branches. I found this was listed on a YouTube video that I saw of broken effects. And I watched the whole YouTube video, and I even watched like an old ride through of Indiana Jones from like 95 and tried to look for it. And I don't know if it's just, well, the 1995 video was very low quality, so I'm not surprised I missed it there. But I just don't remember it. I don't remember seeing it. And even if it was there, the fog effects that's used for the projection of the rats also didn't work. So like nothing in this hallway works.
No, the whole Rat Room is a question mark, an enigma. I do not know what the goal is with the Rat Room, you know? And I would like to know what the goal is, and I would like it to have a goal, perhaps. I would like to feel something in the Rat Room, and instead I feel just confusion, largely.
Yes.
So that brings us to the Dart Hallway, one of our favorites, but the final set of skeletons painted into the wall also doubles as an emergency exit. Did you know this, Alice?
I did know this, actually, because of this exact fact that we found. That final skeleton set of like, it's like a wall that's painted with like 5 skeletons or something. The emergency exit is always open. So you can, while you're driving through the hallway with the darts, there is just like an open door on the left, up to the left. It's wide open. I see it every time. I see it every single time. And so like this makes the skeletons' heads look like they're detached from their bodies, because like the skeletons are taller than the door, right? So like it looks, the heads stay on the wall, but their bodies get pushed back to be an emergency exit. I don't know why this is. I don't know why that door is open.
It's bad show, but it must be open for a reason, right? So perhaps a fire marshal at some point was like, people aren't going to know that this is an exit.
Yeah. Yeah, that was probably it.
It feels like a fire marshal decision. And you know what? A fire marshal's decisions are important. But perhaps now a repaint is in order. Something to make that not so obvious. Perhaps it could be dark unless a light were activated in an emergency or something like that. It feels very odd that you can just see this open skeleton door.
Yeah. And I've heard people talk also about this additionally, not just about the emergency exit, which is kind of just like a funny detail to me, but obviously a necessary one. It's an emergency exit, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
But I hear people talk all the time about how this room, the darts don't work for them or are ineffective. And I've heard this room kind of laughed at on occasion. I think it rules still. Last time I wrote it in January, I was like, this is the most effective room, and the darts flying past, making my hair fly in front of my face, and you know, I don't actually feel like I'm being shot with darts, but I'm also not like a child anymore.
Right.
So
like you don't need to 100% believe the effect to get what the effect is going for.
Yeah, I think the rocking motion of the Jeep, the stops and starts of the Jeep, and how it kind of feels like it's like trembling through the room trying to avoid the darts.
Yeah.
I think that works. I think the air works. The skeletons are painted, which is fine. I heard people complain about that too. They were like, they should be real. I'm like, no, it's a mural hiding traps.
The dart trap. Yeah.
So I've heard a lot of criticism of this room, and I don't really understand them, because I think this effect absolutely slaps.
This used to be the room that scared me the most. Painted skeletons are scarier to me than real, or like quote unquote real, like normal scale skeletons. These painted temple guard skeletons, they did a number on young me's fear factor. So, you know, I still have an affection for it, but the fact remains, it probably doesn't need an open door at the end of the hallway.
Yeah. It's
so
fine.
Yeah, that's fine. And finally, Alice, we're on our last effect. This has felt like a lot of complaining. We tend not to complain too much on this podcast because it is, after all about treating theme parks, rides, and attractions like literature, and that means that we, you know, meet them at their level.
We try not to be complainers, but
yeah. But the complaining has been useful. I think we're setting the stage for something here. The final attraction, or the final effect on the attraction, rather, is the boulder. And the room around it, which is supposed to shift backwards to simulate the Jeep moving backwards as the boulder rolls towards you. The boulder's stuck, Alice.
Yeah,
the boulder ain't rolling anymore.
Boulder ain't rolling. Boulder's stuck. That's too bad. Last time I was there, I felt like it moved a little, or I felt like maybe it was just that the strobe effect was doing a good job of making it look like it was rolling.
Yeah.
I missed it rolling like that I miss a lot. But I felt like their fix with the strobe light was moderately effective. But you said when you wrote on it, you basically didn't see it at all.
Yeah. So if you'll allow me to transition out of recapping the various busted effects on this attraction, and there are many, and a little bit into my personal experience with the ride as it exists today, I'd like to give a little bit of a research report, if you're okay with that.
Yes, please.
Okay, so my encounter with the Indiana Jones adventure happened around the middle of the morning of my most recent trip to Disneyland. So it was probably around 11, starting to get around lunchtime, when we decided to just go ahead and wait and stand by. Lightning Lane, for the record, at that point was already booked for the day.
Yikes.
So that was pretty incredible to see it kind of get snapped up like that. And standby was listed at 60 minutes. Now, Alice, here's something fun about the new setup with standby and Lightning Lane. And I guess it's kind of been like this with FastPass for quite some time, actually. But there's, first of all, new overflow areas for the attractions line outside. The new overflow area connects to the Jungle Cruise, and actually can just be Jungle Cruise overflow queue as well as Indiana Jones overflow queue. So I thought that was really interesting.
That's a clever use of space.
Yeah, these attractions are really close to each other. So I actually started in that overflow and then skipped over the exit area at the direction of a cast member to get into the actual standby. And mind you, this is for the 60-minute standby, so it wasn't even as bad as it can be. We spent the rest of most of that hour in the exterior. So by the time you get onto the bridge that leads up into the temple, that's the Lightning Lane merge. So that's what you're skipping with Lightning Lane these days. And once you're on the interior of the temple, it feels like there has been an effort made lately to keep it moving inside. So on one hand, that's pretty cool, right? Once you're in the temple, it's like a real adventure. You're able to walk freely and not step forward every couple of minutes. Instead, you're just kind of stepping forward really, really regularly through each of the temple rooms. On the other hand, I feel like, you know, in 95 and for a long part of our childhoods experiencing this, that was not the case. You could spend a lot of time in the temple in a standby queue. And as a result, there was more time to hang out and enjoy all of the cool stuff inside the temple. So what I found this time was that I felt very rushed, but also that there was less reason to feel rushed because things have been taken out. The pole that you can push on to activate the spike trap has been removed. You can still pull on the rope to mess with the archaeologists, but the newsreels have been greatly reduced in length. In fact, there's only one newsreel that shows, and it's just the safety message featuring Sala, and it just plays on repeat. So in the projection room, I saw that like 3 times, and I was like, wait, one of those could have been news of the world or whatever it is. Eyes on the World, I think it's called. Eyes on the Globe, I think that might be it.
I think that's
it. One of those could have been Eyes on the Globe, but instead I saw Sala exactly saying the same thing 3 times. So at least I got the safety message. I feel like that's why, by the way, because I do remember being stopped in the projection room by cast members until a safety message played in the past, even if we were fast passing. It was like, you're going to stop here and wait for the whole sequence. So we load up the projection room all the way to capacity. Then the safety message plays, and then you get to move towards the Jeeps. Nowadays, the safety message is always playing, so you inevitably see it inside of 30 seconds. An interesting change that I feel also diminishes the atmosphere. Speaking of diminished atmosphere, I read practically 0 mariglyphics inside the temple itself. I read plenty in the exterior, though. So that was all right, because the exterior line moved agonizingly slow because we were in standby, and standby feels agonizingly slow these days. But almost none inside the temple itself. I managed to snap like 3 good photos of the temple interior. Part of that is my phone's camera uses a low light mode. That means it takes a really slow picture in in dark environments. But also part of that is like, we just weren't stopping. So I didn't get to hang out in there, and that bummed me out just a little bit. When we finally got on the Jeep, things seemed to be going pretty well, though, because, you know, we had only been in the temple for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So the pace of things felt really good. We boarded. I did not get to sit in the driver's seat. That bummed me out. It didn't actually bum me out any. But the ride pretty much began as I might expect. Everything was working to the extent that we have listed here. The skeletons not popping out was pretty jarring to me. The snake being as still as it was pretty jarring. But actually, I gotta say, when we got to the rat room is, for me, when things kind of fell off the rails. We stopped in the rat room for what felt like 30 seconds. And that's just a dark room, you know? There's not a lot going on in there.
Yeah. That's a really common stopping point for it's like designed as a stopping point for if the boulder room doesn't work.
Right. So that should have tipped me off right away, right? Like, here we go. Because from that point forward, the beautiful score written by Sir John Williams himself, completely desynchronized from the rest of the ride.
Oh no.
It was not on for much of the rest of the ride through. We paused at the beginning of the dart room. We paused at the end of the dart room. And when we finally got into the boulder room, we were under Indy for maybe 15 seconds before he said anything, in basically total silence.
Oof.
And then he said, back up. And then like a light turned on under the boulder, which wasn't rolling. And we went down and the ride ended.
Oh.
And I was just sitting there being like, yeesh. Like, there are choices being made in how this ride is presenting itself, specifically in the queuing situation, which, again, I do understand the operational necessities of, and like the reason you might want to keep things moving inside, you know, given that we are still in a era where there's a respiratory illness flying around and interior queues can exacerbate that. On the other hand, many of Disneyland's queues are inside, and there seems to be no consideration in those queues, so I don't know. But on the other hand, it's like, it's set up to not give you time to experience the story in the way that it was designed to be told back in 95. You know, hours stuck in this line, in this temple, deciphering hieroglyphics, just whiling them away with your decoder card. Like, we're not telling the story that way anymore, right?
Right.
The story is now, wait outside, it's nice outside, you know, there are cool plants, and you can hear the fun music loop. It is, to this day, one of the greatest music loops at Disneyland. It's a very good... There are several Marty Robbins songs in there, and I love that guy. I Got Spurs played, Alice. I was like, he's got spurs. Anyways. So, like, you spend all that time outside, you walk into the temple, and it's like boom, 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 room, 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 and you don't really get to take in the atmosphere. And then you get on the ride, half of everything is broken, and then there is the possibility of like a catastrophic desync that just kind of wrecks the rest of the experience. And look, things happen, right? Perhaps this was a loading issue. Perhaps this was, you know, somebody getting on who needed extra time. Totally acceptable. Not blaming any individual person. But that combined with all of the kind of disappointing ways that the ride is currently presenting itself, that for me made me go like, oh no, this old thing is not currently exhibiting signs of eternal youth and beauty. This thing is, it was glittering gold, but all that glitters is not gold. And even though this attraction broke the mold, it's getting kind of old, you know?
Yeah.
And that stinks to realize, because I think the core of this ride, the core of the intention of the experience, is still very much intact and is so popular that lightning lanes are sold out by noon, you know?
Yeah.
Like, this ride is still an e-ticket. It punches so far above its weight class compared to its mega budget brethren in Galaxy's Edge. It is absolutely doing numbers, and it's so good, Alice. Like, that's why we did a miniseries on it. It rocks. It makes fans of people who don't even particularly love theme parks. You know, this is one of the key experiences that you've got to do when you're at Disneyland. And either due to neglect, which we have speculated on a little bit, right? Or due to technical difficulties in the way that it's designed and how it's holding together, or due to operational necessity, this ride can't shut down. It would throw off operations too much. We can't lose this capacity. Whatever the reason, it's not living up to the promise of what it was.
You're absolutely right. It's not living up to the promise that it was. And despite that, as you said, lightning lanes done by noon, a standby queue hours long. People are still going for it. And there's a cynical part of me that says that, well, because everybody is still willing to ride it, that means maybe that Disney thinks they don't really need to fix anything. There's still going to be people who fall over backwards trying to ride it as many times as they can, 4 times a day, 3 days a week. And it's still going to be a people eater. It's still going to hold on to all of these people in such a high capacity ride and a high capacity queue that maybe maybe Disney thinks, well, how it is today is fine. How it is today is good, even. If people are still riding it, people are still coming to Disneyland and spending their money and spending their time and energy riding this ride, then maybe we don't need to touch it. And I don't like being cynical.
No.
But I also don't like defending billion-dollar companies in general. So part of me thinks that this might be the case. And I don't know what it would take to fix the ride up. I don't know what it would take to get Disney to like make moves on this ride. Maybe they're making moves on it. I hear that it's going to be shut down for a good long weekend this November. Maybe they have plans. Maybe they
have a snake that they're just gonna plug in, like just get that snake in there.
Maybe. And that would bump up the ride value to me like 30%.
It's pretty good.
It's
a high value snake.
It's a high value snake, and I really like it. And it's scary.
I hesitate to say that this ride gets no love, right? In fact, the projection mapping on the Chamber of Destiny alone is such a plus. And it's really, really a recent addition, Yeah. It's such a big plus. It really sells that moment in an interesting way. It's maybe my favorite use of projection mapping at the park. And they're using projection mapping for everything these days. So, that's saying something, right? Does the ride get no love? No, but it gets, weird love. Why take out the skeletons? Why not help the boulder to roll? It simply needs a push or some WD-40, I imagine. Now, we are sitting here with our arms firmly in our armchairs, right?
Yes, of course.
We do not know what to do to fix the Indiana Jones adventure. But to me, the really easy, immediate fixes, get the snake moving, get the boulder rolling, do whatever you can to make sure that everything stays synchronized. And for heaven's sakes, let people into the temple just a little bit earlier in their queue experience. And I feel like the ride jumps way back up. You said 30% for the snake. I'm talking we're back to almost 80% of the ride that I used to know and love, if those things are happening again.
Yeah.
And those things you could knock those out over a long weekend. That would be no biggie, I think, with a sufficiently experienced team, given the resources that they need. Now, again, armchair, who knows? Maybe the snake is actually haunted by the spirit of 1,000 snakes, and that's why they can't make a new snake.
Maybe you're right. Maybe it was a load-bearing snake.
Right. But or perhaps just build a new snake, It's mind-boggling to me that they have this treasure of an attraction, this gem, this treasure of Mara. And all it needs is a spit shine and to be treated with a little bit more respect in how we choose to use its cue to tell the story. And I feel like we're back on top, right? Not only is this now an e-ticket that is still holding up and still punching above its weight, now it's actually punching with the big boys because it is still a big boy. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And for me, that I think is the takeaway from this episode. It's not look at all this broken stuff. It's this broken stuff is not as big of a deal in piecemeal, but, over the course of the entire attraction, it adds up. And it adds up substantially. And it takes a ride that is so many people's favorites. And to return to a phrase, leaves it a pale shadow of what it once was.
I agree.
Well, Alice, it sounds like our third episode of Eyes of Mara, the new miniseries all about Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Forbidden Eye, has come to an end, but one final episode is on the way. Join us next week for episode 4, It Belongs in a Museum, or There Is Nothing You Can Possess That I Cannot Take Away. which I'm really excited for the conclusion of this gripping saga. And Alice, I cannot thank you enough for joining me on this journey so far.
Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. I am so excited to talk about this ride all the time. Like, we might just turn this whole dang podcast into an Indiana Jones fan cast, because this is so fun to talk about with you.
Alice, if you wanted to continue this conversation with me beyond the confines of the podcast, in fact, this invitation goes out to anybody listening out there. The conversation does continue online.
Yes, on the internet. We're always on Twitter. You can follow this show on Twitter at Happy Places Pod. And I am on Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok at Alice White THP for those happy places.
And I'm just on Twitter, and I am at buddy_Duquesne. Duquesne is spelled DUQUESNE.
And if you like the show and you want to support us monetarily, you can find that information online at patreon.com/thosehappyplaces. You'll find bonus content, you'll find mini episodes, you'll find blog posts. I just wrote a little blog post that covered a little bit of the ride at 1995, or some bonus effects that we haven't covered on the show. You can find that post and many more on our patreon.com/thosehappyplaces.
Now, Alice, I am going to add some music to this episode.
Oh, and where would that music have come from, buddy?
Well, the theme song of Eyes of Mara is called There Will Come a Time. It comes to us from music creator Helizna CC0. We use that music under a Creative Commons 0 license, which means it's actually public domain. So, Alice, this song belongs to all of us, and I think it's a pretty cool song.
It is a really cool song.
The rest of the music in this show comes to us from Kevin MacLeod. His website is incompetech.com. All of the licensing information can be found for each of the tracks used in the show notes.
And speaking of music, there is one more track that I think we need to talk about.
Oh, it's ramping up in the background. I think I hear it. It's Golden Gate by the California Feetwarmers featuring Phil Alvin?
It sure is. You can find this track and many more tracks by the Feetwarmers on their website, thecaliforniafeetwarmers.com.
Alice, this has been a joy so far. Next week, we wrap this whole thing up in a bow, and we find out what this ride means today and what it will mean in the future. I cannot wait to really dive into some, critical structural analysis of Indiana Jones and the Temple of the Forbidden Eye, and I can't wait to take you on that journey with me.
Yes, I'm so excited. This is going to be so much fun. This has been a great mini-series, one of our best, I think, and it's a pleasure to do it with you, my best friend.
And to everyone out there, I say, I wrote it in my diary so I didn't have to remember.